Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. I'm sorry I was a little upset banging on my stove as I thought about the concept of superdelegates. So I thought I'd make a quick video explaining what the heck they are. Well, superdelegates are really important when it comes to nominating candidates for the presidency, specifically in the Democratic Party. So let's get into it. If we turn the clock back to 1968, I'm going to remind you, because of course you all know about the disaster that occurred at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Now, it was a brouhaha. The house was on fire because the people inside that convention were nominating Hubert Humphrey, kind of a political moderate. These are political insiders. It's like that old room filled with cigar smoke where the old white guys go, we want that guy. And outside the convention, it's just going up in flames. There's protesters. The police are billy clubbing people on orders from the mayor. It's an ugly, ugly scene. And of course, Hubert Humphrey went on to lose in a close election to Richard Nixon. But the Democrats kind of went into the back room and said, we're not going to let that happen again. And in 1972, there's something called the Mcgovern-Fraser Commission. And what they recommended was that you turn the power over to the people, that the delegates that are pledging their support for candidates really should be mirroring what people are voting for in states. So they did that. This is the Democratic Party being very, very democratic. And they went on to nominate George Mcgovern in 1972. He got killed. They nominate a political outsider. He was a governor of Georgia, but he's not a huge political insider, in Jimmy Carter in 1976. He does get elected, but then he gets destroyed in 1980 by Ronald Reagan after a very competitive primary race against Ted Kennedy. So the Democratic Party, looking at kind of what they see as the failure of Jimmy Carter and the disaster of 72 and George McGovern, say never again. The adults need to be in the room from now on. So what they did was they formed a commission, and this was called the Hunt Commission, named after Jim Hunt, the Democratic governor of North Carolina, and they put their noggins together and came up with this concept of superdelegates, that the Democratic Party should reserve a percentage of delegates at the convention that aren't attached to the people, that can vote their conscience. And they're called pleos, party leaders and elected officials. Now, originally, there were supposed to be a proportional superdelegate of about 30% to the 70% that would be pledged delegates. A pledged delegate is a delegate that can't change their mind. So, for instance, in New Hampshire, just this month, we have Bernie Sanders beating Hillary Clinton by about 60% to 38%. Now, Hillary Clinton is going to get proportional representation. She's going to get about 9 pledged delegates out of New Hampshire to 15 pledged delegates for Bernie Sanders. But New Hampshire has 8 super delegates. Now, a superdelegate is a party insider. Now, in 1984, it really only included the state party chairpeople and the vice president. Congress got to pick 60% of themselves to be delegates at the Democratic National Conventions, and then there were add-ons of governors and mayors from states that were picked by the political parties in each state. Now, that changed in 1988, and you'll see the numbers just kind of increase. Now, in 1984, it was 14%. That's down from the 30% recommended by the Hunt Commission. But in 1988, it starts to creep up when they start saying, now let's do 80% of all Democratic Congress people. Now let's do everybody in the Democratic National Convention, and we'll also have a category called distinguished politicians. In 1992, there are unpledged add-ons, just kind of a larger group that the state officials can choose. And then in 1996, they decide all of Congress is worthy. So now we have superdelegates made up of every single congressperson, every single former Democratic president and former Democratic vice president, every single former Speaker of the House that was Democratic, and minority leaders, as well as every single Democratic national member. There's a lot of superdelegates, about 712. There are 712 superdelegates, and there are 4,051 pledged delegates in the Democratic National Convention. That's 4,763. I hate math, but about 20% of the delegates are unpledged. And this is undemocratic. They can vote their conscience. They don't even have to vote for somebody who's currently running. They can support, if they wanted, Joe Biden, who decided not to run. It's really up to them. Now, it really hasn't affected, to be honest, the outcome of a race yet. In 1984, they threw their support with Walter Mondale in a very close race, but he was still ahead from Gary Hart, so it wasn't like they changed the outcome. In 2004, the superdelegates actually supported Howard Dean. Of course, John Kerry beat him out, with pledged delegates coming out of the caucuses and the primaries, so they didn't have an effect there. Everybody thought in 2008 it might be really scary because we have kind of an insider with Hillary Clinton and the new kid on the block with Barack Obama, but at the end of the day, they threw their support with Barack Obama because they saw the writing on the wall. But now there's a fear that they don't like Bernie Sanders, that they're afraid that Bernie Sanders might lose a general election, that he's too radical for the masses, and that if it's close, and if he's ahead by a little bit, maybe they throw their support to Hillary Clinton and change the outcome. Now, there are some caveats. For instance, superdelegates can get thrown out of the party. Joe Lieberman, you got thrown out. He's a Connecticut senator. He supported John McCain. So if you support a Republican and you're a superdelegate, you're out of here. He wasn't welcomed in. When you break it down, there is kind of a diversity element that's been put into question, because even though white males only make up about 28% of the Democratic Party, they make up 50% of all superdelegates. And when it comes down to it, that superdelegate vote is worth about 10,000 regular citizen votes in a primary and a caucus. So what do you think about superdelegates? Is it kind of a ledge of sanity for the Democratic Party to save itself with the adults in the room? Or do you think it should be the will of the people that should lead the conventions and who the eventual nominee is? Now, we're going to give the Republicans a pass for this one. They do have 123 superdelegates, about 3 per state, but that number is pretty fixed, and they are pledged delegates. They have to vote with their states. They can't make up their own mind. So why don't you leave a comment down below? What do you think about superdelegates? Are they superific? Are they super duper super? Or are they super duper bad? Leave it down in the comments below. Thanks for watching Hip Hughes History. Always remember, where attention goes, energy flows, and we'll see you next time you press my buttons. I'm gonna go bang on the stove some more.